I'm the author and creator of this new YouTube channel dedicated to education. Today I'm looking at the very popular Duolingo, which is a language learning software app, and it's really going to be a critical overview. Let's see what we're going to do. Well, it may not be in this order, but we're going to see what Duolingo says about itself. Then we're going to see how I use Duolingo and what others say about Duolingo. Then we're going to listen to a Duolingo podcast, which is an assimilation of many authors and their thoughts and opinion and muses and procrastinations about the role of Duolingo. And then we're going to look at some possibilities of strategies for enhancing language studies together with using Duolingo. So let's make a start. So Duolingo is a popular language learning app known for its gamified approach to teaching languages. It processes a wide range of languages. It offers courses in over 40 languages, all of the Romance languages, but many others, including rare ones like Klingon and Navajo. It is designed to appeal to people that have experience playing games on computer. Its game-like structure, complete with streaks, achievements, leaderboards, XP rewards, makes language learning fun and motivating. It's freely available. Now, if you choose to invest in Duolingo, they will give you some extensive functionality, but only for certain languages. There's an AI component for, I think, 4 Romance languages, but it doesn't extend to all the other languages. It's designed by a group of outstanding computer engineers. It's a science-based learning program. The app employs techniques grounded in cognitive science like spaced repetition, adaptive learning, etc., etc. The lessons are bite-sized. They're short and manageable. It appeals both to beginners. It also appeals to those who have some experience and a definitive skill set to refine the skill set. There's lots of engaging community features such as forums, clubs and leaderboards. Occasionally, some courses will incorporate cultural notes, teaching not only the language but also its context and its usage in everyday life. Users can set daily goals to match their learning pace, whether casual or intensive. I work on the campus of a university and I don't drive to the university. I take public transport every day, and I always use these public transport periods to get out my Duolingo. And currently I'm returning to Chinese, which I did 30 years ago, and I'm returning to Italian, which I did maybe 40 years ago. Now, my Italian is very accessible. So it's almost as if I haven't lost any of the skill sets. And I find to my disappointment that my Chinese is very non-accessible. So it's not so much reviewing, revising, revisiting. It's actually relearning. And it's quite a painful process. But one I've been doing for about a year now. The Italian is much more pleasant an experience to undertake and undergo. Now, there are many innovative add-ons, including Duolingo Stories, podcasts, and Duolingo for Schools, not available in all languages. Duolingo is accessible for all ages. Now, you can track your progress very easily, and Duolingo is a good firm. They constantly update the software and they improve design features where they think it's appropriate and when they think it's appropriate. So let's just see how I use Duolingo. So I'm going to need to quickly go over to another part of the screen. All right, so this is Duolingo Italian, so our.
Nostro.
Okay, and this is how I'm doing it. I'm just going to do it. It's live.
Io non ho le vostre bottiglie. Ho vostre.
Io non voglio le vostre bottiglie. I don't have your bottles. Io Let's try again. I didn't have the microphone on. Io non ho le vostre bottiglie. Okay, it's fine. Our is nostro.
Nostra.
Okay.
Gli elefanti sono i tuoi.
Gli elefanti sono i tuoi. The elephants are yours. Okay, your vostri.
Vostri.
Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make some mistakes just to show you what I do. I'm really going through this for the mistakes, not the correct answers. Okay.
L'animale mangia il suo cibo.
Okay, I won't bother with that one. So.
L'animale mangia il suo cibo.
Okay, this means the animal eats his food or her food or its food. Now I'm going to just make a mistake here. The animal eats. Okay, the answer is its, and I'm going to put my food. Okay, that's a mistake. So the moment I hit on this here, it was a mistake. Now, what I normally do then when I make a mistake is I screen capture. This is a massive plus. I strongly recommend, if you're doing Duolingo seriously, to use this little bit of advice, because the moment you have a screen capture of all of your mistakes, you have a very quick way of revising, and it saves you a lot of time, because if you're not fully aware of how you've made the mistake, then it can take a lot of time. It can be a delaying factor. Particularly in Chinese, it's a big delaying factor. So that's how I use Duolingo. Now let's just move on. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play a podcast. Just bear with me 1 minute. And just wait for the podcast to load.
All right, everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today, we're...
Just bear with me for 1 minute.
All right, everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today, we're tackling Duolingo. You know, that app with the little green owl. We're going to figure out how to, really make it work for us. Not just leveling up in the app, but actually learning the language.
Yeah, we're talking going beyond just quick vocab bursts. This is like Duolingo boot camp. From casual learner to, a language ninja.
Love that. So for this deep dive, we've got two main sources. First, we've got this video from a linguist, Dr. Taylor Jones, I think.
That's right.
Yeah. And she really breaks down, Duolingo's strengths and weaknesses. And then we have this other source, this text, that's all about learning Chinese on Duolingo.
And it's interesting. Both of them kind of point out that Duolingo's, fantastic for getting started, but it's not enough on its own.
Right. So it's kind of like trying to build a house with just a hammer, right?
Okay,
you need more tools.
Exactly. And one of the things is that Duolingo really leans on translation, which can actually make it harder to really progress in the language.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So how do we get around that? What are those missing tools?
Well, one thing you can do is actually supplement Duolingo with a grammar book.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Now hold on. Before everyone tunes out, I've tried using grammar books. They'll just end up gathering dust on my shelf.
Yeah.
How do you actually make them work?
Yeah, the key is you don't want to treat it like a textbook where you're memorizing every rule. It's more like a reference, like a detective guide.
Okay, so you're saying more like a cheat sheet than a textbook.
Exactly. Yeah. So when Duolingo gives you something and you're like, wait, why is it like that? That's when you go to the grammar book.
Okay, that's helpful. I like that.
Yeah. And just focus on the sections that are directly relevant to what you're learning on Duolingo.
Okay, so like targeted strikes.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay, so we've got Duolingo plus a grammar reference. What else can we do to kind of supercharge our learning here?
Well, Dr. Jones had this great point about speaking the language from day one. Even if you just know a few words, just start speaking out loud.
So like find a language exchange partner or something.
Exactly. There are platforms like italki where you can connect with native speakers online.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And, those early conversations, they can be kind of awkward and funny. Dr. Jones even told a story about how, like, she was discussing bone breaks and lower body injuries with her tutor.
Wow, breaking the ice, huh? But I guess that highlights how important it is to actually use the language, not just like passively absorb it.
Exactly. You can ace all the Duolingo lessons, but if you can't actually hold a conversation, then, like, what's the point?
Right. Okay, so let's get into some specific learning hacks because both of our sources had some really good ones. What's like the number one thing we can do to make Duolingo work harder for us?
This one's a game changer. Before you even look at the word bank in Duolingo, try to formulate the entire sentence in your mind.
Ah, okay. So you're not just recognizing words, you're actually thinking about how they fit together.
Exactly. You're training your brain to think in the language, not just translate.
Gotcha.
And then, once you've got the sentence, say it out loud before moving on.
So even if I'm just like by myself in my PJs, I should be talking out loud.
Think of it on this. You're engaging more senses.
Yeah.
Like, you're seeing the words, you're hearing them, you're even feeling them as you form the sounds.
Wow.
That actually strengthens the neural pathways and helps you remember better.
Okay, cool. So talking to yourself is good. That's good to know. Dr. Jones also mentioned something about messy note-taking, especially for languages with like more complex writing systems.
Right. She used Hebrew as an example, and she was talking about how she's got notebooks full of like scribbles and arrows and who knows what else.
Yeah.
But it really helps her remember.
So it's not about like beautiful calligraphy, it's about the physical act of writing.
Exactly. There's something about that hand-to-brain connection that just makes things stick.
Okay, ditch the fancy stationery. Got it. Now this is where it gets interesting, right? Dr. Jones kind of spilled the tea about Duolingo's secret design.
Yeah. She pointed out that Duolingo, like a lot of apps, is designed to keep you engaged for as long as possible.
Right.
And they're pretty good at it.
Yeah, that little owl is sneaky. But the key is, like, we don't want to let the game become the goal.
Right, exactly. We need to take control of our learning journey, set realistic goals, create a schedule that works for us. Not for the owl.
Right. So she used the French course as an example. It's got like 180 units or something. If you're only doing one skill a day, it would take you almost 5 years to finish.
Exactly. That's why a time-bound plan is so important. Break those massive courses down into smaller chunks. Decide on a case that you can actually maintain. Remember, consistency is more important than speed.
Okay. So instead of trying to like conquer the whole French course in a year, maybe set a goal of finishing like 2 units a week, something like that.
Exactly. And as you're going through it, embrace the stumbles, embrace the mistakes. Don't be afraid to get things wrong.
It's about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, right?
Exactly. Mistakes are actually a sign that you're learning, you're pushing yourself.
Yeah. Okay, speaking of pushing boundaries, both of our sources talk about how important it is to like move beyond Duolingo once you reach a certain point.
Yeah. Think of Duolingo as boot camp, It gets you ready for the real world, but the real learning happens out there.
So like start watching movies, reading news articles, maybe even planning a trip to a country where they speak the language.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to challenge yourself. Dr. Jones had this great suggestion to try to express like complex ideas using only the 625 most common words in the language.
Whoa. That sounds intense. Okay, one more thing before we move on. Dr. Jones talked about this in her video, and I thought it was really interesting. The increasing use of AI in Duolingo's content.
Yeah, and that raises some interesting questions about the potential pitfalls of relying on AI-generated language.
Yeah. She gave this example of a French sentence where the AI produced like language that just sounded completely unnatural.
Right, and that's where it's so important to cross-reference, double-check. If something seems off, consult a grammar book. Or even better, ask a native speaker for clarification.
Okay, so AI can be a helpful tool, but you can't blindly trust it. You still need to use your own judgment.
Absolutely. AI can create the words, but it's up to us to understand the nuances and make sure it's actually correct and sounds natural.
Right. Makes sense. All right, I'm already feeling like a much more informed Duolingo user, but we've only just scratched the surface, right?
Yeah, that's right. We still have that fascinating text about learning Chinese, specifically on Duolingo. And he gets into some really interesting strategies that we haven't even touched on yet. So this text really focuses on Chinese, which, has its own unique challenges, especially for English speakers. I mean, that writing system, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Those characters can be pretty intimidating. So what does the text, what does it recommend?
Well, it really emphasizes active recall. And spaced repetition, especially for those characters.
Okay, break down spaced repetition for me. Is that like leaving space between the words when you write?
No. It's a learning technique.
Yeah.
You basically review information at increasing intervals. So like, let's say you learn a new character today, right? You'd review it again tomorrow, then maybe a few days later, then a week later, and so on.
Ah, okay. So it's like strategically reminding your brain so it doesn't forget.
Exactly. The idea is by spacing it out, you're forcing your brain to work harder to retrieve the information. Yep. And that actually makes the memory stronger.
Okay, that makes sense. So how does that apply to like learning Chinese characters specifically?
Well, the text suggests keeping a separate notebook. And anytime you come across a character that you're really struggling with, you jot it down. And then you can use flashcards or even a spaced repetition app to practice them regularly.
So you're basically creating like a personalized study system that targets your weak spots.
Exactly.
Oh, cool.
And don't worry about making it pretty. Remember, it's all about the process, not the aesthetics.
Right. Scribble away. Okay, so we've talked a lot about like individual learning techniques, but both of our sources also talk about like the importance of mindset.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. They both really highlight the idea of embracing imperfection.
Yeah.
And celebrating those small wins along the way.
Okay, tell me more about that because, language learning can be frustrating. There are definitely days where I feel like I'm just like not making any progress.
Oh, absolutely. There will be days like that. But the key is to focus on the long game.
All right.
Okay? Celebrate those little victories, like when you successfully order a coffee in your target language or you understand a joke in a foreign film. Mm-hmm. Those are huge wins.
It's about finding the joy in the journey, not just, the destination.
Exactly. And remember that every language learner starts somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. Even the most fluent polyglots were once beginners, stumbling over basic phrases.
I need to remember that. Okay. So what else did the Chinese learning text have to say about maximizing Duolingo?
It actually had this really interesting strategy. It said, don't just like passively accept the sentences that Duolingo gives you. Try to like actively manipulate them, change the tense, switch out some words, experiment with different grammatical structures.
Oh, okay. So you're basically taking Duolingo's building blocks and creating your own like linguistic masterpiece.
Exactly. It's about going beyond just recognizing correct sentences and actually starting to produce your own.
That's such a cool idea. It kind of turns Duolingo into like a creative playground rather than just a passive exercise.
Right. And it ties back to that idea of moving beyond translation, right? You're actively playing with the language, which forces you to engage with it on a deeper level.
I'm starting to see Duolingo in a whole new light now. It's not just an app for learning vocabulary. It's a tool for developing linguistic like flexibility and creativity.
Exactly. And as you get more comfortable with the language, don't be afraid to branch out and explore other resources.
Like what kind of things are you talking about?
Think podcasts, movies, music, even children's books can be really helpful. Mm-hmm. The key is to find content that you genuinely enjoy and that aligns with your interests.
Right. That's where the real fun begins, right? When you can use the language to explore things you're already passionate about.
Absolutely. And as you progress, you'll naturally start to notice connections between the language you're learning and your native language.
Oh, like how? What kind of connections?
Well, you might start to recognize cognates, which are, words that have similar origins and meanings across different languages. Yeah. Or you might discover like interesting grammatical parallels or even cultural insights that really illuminate the way language shapes our understanding of the world.
That's fascinating. It's like language learning becomes like a window into a whole new way of thinking.
Exactly. And that's where the real magic happens, right? It's not just about being able to like order a coffee or ask for directions. It's about expanding your horizons, opening your mind to new perspectives.
Okay, I'm officially inspired. But before we, get too carried away, let's bring it back to our listener. What are the key takeaways here? What are the things they can like actually put into action today?
Let's distill those nuggets of wisdom.
I love that. So what are the top 3 things our listeners should remember from our Duolingo deep dive?
All right. Number 1, Duolingo is a starting point. Don't be afraid to jump off that springboard into other stuff.
Okay, yeah. So find a language partner, start watching movies, all that good stuff.
Exactly. Supplement Duolingo with real-world practice.
Makes sense. Okay, what's number 2?
Number 2, spaced repetition. Super important. Don't just speed through lessons and forget everything. Make those flashcards, use an app, whatever works for you.
Right. So consistent effort, not cramming. Got it. All right, what's that crucial 3rd takeaway? What should we leave our listeners with?
Don't be afraid to mess up. Really, it's okay to sound silly, to make mistakes, to experiment.
Yeah, I think sometimes we forget that. We get so focused on being perfect.
And it's that's not the point, right?
Yeah.
The point is to learn and have fun along the way.
Exactly. Embrace the messiness of it all.
Exactly. So to everyone listening, remember, Duolingo is a tool, but it's up to you to make it work for you. Don't just passively go through the motions. Really engage with the language, play with it, experiment, have fun.
I love that. So well said. And hey, if you find any cool Duolingo tips or resources, share them with us. Maybe your tip will inspire a future deep dive.
Absolutely. Keep learning, keep exploring.
And keep those language fires burning. Until next time, happy learning, everyone.
So we've listened to the podcast, and now we're going to look at some strategies for enhancing Duolingo's effectiveness. I mean, what can we add to the mix? What can we have as well as Duolingo to become more skilled language learners? Well, pretty obvious one, I think, is a grammar book, because I agree with all the analyses of some of the speakers that Duolingo does concentrate very specifically on translation. And it doesn't really spend too much time teaching different levels of grammar. So you will need a grammar book. There's FSI languages. They provide basic, intermediate, and advanced grammar book courses for Chinese and for many other languages. So certainly buy or borrow or download a grammar book. Secondly, converse with native speakers. I teach a lot of Chinese students, for example, and it's really helpful speaking with them. But you can get apps. You can interact with live people using apps like italki. That's really worthwhile doing. What can we say about the dynamic of using Duolingo? Well, I'm thinking now of Duolingo Chinese more than Duolingo Italian. Duolingo Italian is much easier than Duolingo Chinese. Okay, so let's think about applying this to Chinese. Formulate complete sentences before you translate. So when doing the translation exercise, try to compose the entire sentence in your mind before selecting words from the word bank or typing out. I would agree with that. Verbalize sentences before moving on. You'll notice that there's always a little loudspeaker icon where you can get Duolingo to revoice the Italian or the Chinese for you. So I do that several times before I move on. Use Duolingo consistently and regularly. I work on a university campus and I teach postgraduates, and I don't bus. I don't drive into the campus to the university. What I do is I use public transport, and when I'm on public transport, I always use this as an opportunity to keep up to speed with my different language learning plans, including mostly Chinese. I normally tend to do Italian first thing in the morning, and I do Chinese when I'm on my way to work. But be realistic of the schedule. You're not going to learn Italian in a weekend. And you're certainly not going to learn Chinese in a weekend. And you're not going to learn Italian in 3 months. And you're not going to learn Chinese in 3 months. There was a book when I was a young man. I don't know if it's available today. Hugo's Italian in 3 months. I think that's a little bit optimistic. Take notes, particularly if you're doing complex languages with characters such as Chinese. It makes a lot of sense to note down freehand the Chinese characters. There's a lot of repetition software available for memorization, tools such as Anki and Memrise. They're worth having. Engage with authentic content on the internet. You can get videos, films, podcasts, etc., etc. So it's always good to immerse oneself in authentic content. If you're learning Chinese, focus on pinyin input for Chinese. Practicing typing characters using pinyin keyboards is very important. Review challenging characters frequently. I use flashcards. I have a flashcard app which has got 20,000 Chinese characters, which is pretty comprehensive. Utilize listening exercises to train your ear. Actively participate in listening exercises. Look up unfamiliar characters. This is, of course, is Chinese. Supplement Duolingo with other resources. When I studied Chinese 30 years ago, I bought a whole set of texts, and I was a little bit annoyed that I hadn't kept up the language. So I went out and I bought exactly replicas with the exact copy of the same texts, same edition I mean. So I have those original texts with me today. Yes, use spaced repetition flashcards for Chinese characters. Practice tones in Mandarin Chinese. That's something that you can easily access if you buy a standard text. The FSI Chinese languages textbooks and tapes have a lot of practice tones opportunities. And this is really important. Consider graded readers for immersive grammar learning. I would strongly recommend that anyone who's serious about learning a language would maybe consider buying a novel, quite a famous novel. And then get the original novel in Chinese and then just compare both translations. This simultaneous translation is a very powerful way of learning. I think it's probably better than graded readers, because if you're reading a standard novel, 700 or 800 pages, then you're certainly reading at different levels. So I hope you have enjoyed. And if you've enjoyed, please remember to subscribe, like, and leave a comment.